Blackstone, class of '08, from Chicago, who had lived in France prior to the outbreak of the war and had become deeply interested in this country and fond of its people, his biography would say. When Germany attacked France in August 1914, he enlisted as a private in the 2nd Regiment of Battalion C of the Foreign Legion. They wasted little time rushing Stone to the front. He was sent up with a machine gun company in October and lasted a few months before being wounded by shrapnel on February 15, 1915. "One day I got a call from his company to treat a wounded man," the regiment's surgeon would remember. "It was Stone, I found, with a hole in his side made by a shrapnel ball, which had probably penetrated his left lung. He was carried back by my squad of stretcher-bearers from the front-line trench, the Blanc Sablon, our headquarters, where I applied the first dressing, and from there removed to a hospital about 8 miles back. I did not see him again, and heard that he had died of his wound in the hospital." The American Eddie Stone of Chicago lingered for 12 days and died on February 27, 1915. There are others, but perhaps the most famous of these Harvard volunteers is the New Yorker Alan Seeger, who, after graduating in 1910, left for Paris, where he refused to be implicated in any kind of a job. As the Germans approached the city in late August 1914, he too volunteered for the French Foreign Legion, out of love for France. Seeger, Harvard, 10, would write his mother, "Everybody should take part in this struggle, which is to have so decisive an effect, not only on the nations engaged, but on all humanity. There should be no neutrals, but everyone should bear some of the burden." Of his own prospects, he put the chances of surviving at about 10 to 1. In the face of these odds, he wrote, "Death is nothing terrible at all. It may mean something more wonderful than life. It cannot possibly mean anything worse to the good soldier." Seeger took his place in the trenches in the fall of 1914 and was wounded in Champagne in February 1915. Perhaps with a better understanding of his chances of surviving, he penned one of the most famous poems of the Great War. "I have a rendezvous with death at some disputed barricade, when spring comes back with rustling shade and apple blossoms fill the air. I have a rendezvous with death when spring brings back blue days and fair." It wasn't in spring but in summer that Seeger had his rendezvous. On July 4, 1916, the 4th day of the massive offense on the Somme, Seeger and his fellow legionnaires attacked across a wide field already littered with corpses, their destination the village of Bellois-en-Santerre. "I caught sight of Seeger and called to him, making a sign with my hand," a friend would remember. "He answered with a smile. How pale he was! His tall silhouette stood out on the green of the cornfield. He was the tallest man in his section. His head erect and pride in his eye, I saw him running forward with bayonet fixed. Soon he disappeared, and that was the last time I saw my friend." The village was taken, though Seeger, fallen among the first in the attack, could but cheer his comrades on as they dashed past the spot where he lay dying. Seeger left behind another poem, Memorial Day Ode, anticipating the United States' eventual entry into the war, from which no people nobly stands aloof. He would write, "If in all moments we have given proof of virtues that were thought American, I know not if in all things done and said, all has been well and good." From the outbreak of the war, through the German invasion of Belgium, to the desperate stand on the Marne in September 1914, and through the bleeding of the French at Verdun and the catastrophic losses at the Somme, sympathy for the Allied cause at Harvard remained strong. The war itself held an enduring fascination for its undergraduates, raised as they were to appreciate the many glories of their forebears in the Civil War and the current and inspiring writings of Robert Bridges, Rudyard Kipling, Edmund Goss, Thomas Hardy, and others. Of course, there was Alan Seeger's poetry, too, and his noble self-sacrifice on the Somme, a dose of glory that quickened the heartbeat of many a Harvard man. Harvard men were also at the forefront of the preparedness campaign that proved a vibrant force in the mid-1910s. One of the school's most famous graduates, the former President Theodore Roosevelt, Harvard, 1880, became one of preparedness's loudest and most forceful proponents, and in doing so proved himself a giant thorn in the side of the pacifist President Woodrow Wilson, who had campaigned in 1916 on a promise to keep the United States out of what was seen by some as an irrelevant struggle between lumbering and decrepit empires. At Roosevelt